that says it's possible to change sex and that any man can claim he's a woman. We have 6 main concerns. Firstly, the poor anti-democratic process. Secondly, that the supplementary order paper and the other documentation doesn't tell the full story. Thirdly, that big changes require good evidence. Fourth, that lesbians are under threat. There are impacts, important ones on children. And finally, it casts doubt on whether women and girls should be able to have services that meet their needs.
First of all, we'd like to comment on the poor anti-democratic process. Good, robust law is made with good, robust consultation. New Zealanders have not been appropriately consulted over the past 4 years. We've seen the body language, the unwillingness to listen, to engage or understand. In the UK, in Spain, in Germany, similar legislation has already been rejected. And in many other countries, it has only passed on the coattails of popular legislation. It was not democratic that the bill was not foreshadowed in the Labour Party manifesto. It's not democratic when Māori have not been consulted, as the treaty demands. It's not democratic when the DIA said there were no impacts and therefore did no research or risk mitigation. It's not democratic when the DIA commissioned research about organizations speaking up for women's rights rather than speaking with them. It's not democratic when the legislation allows for a sex change, but says the definition of sex is out of scope.
The supplementary order paper doesn't tell the full story. This legislation is the keystone of a suite of massive legal and policy changes that will see the complete replacement of sex as a category by the vague and contested idea of gender identity. Much of this has already happened with no public oversight, but we're being told that the legislation is for kindness, convenience, and cost saving. First, to the policy work. Policy work at the Ministry for Women has, without any new law, notification, or risk assessment, created a definition of woman by self-identification. Now, calculating the gender pay gap is being done using this, even though the ministry couldn't confirm to us whether this was legal. The law supports the negation of sex, this one, the Bdmrr supplementary order paper. A Human Rights Act changes that are coming in will mandate a belief in gender identity. Many lesbians, in fact, most people in the New Zealand population, don't believe there is such a thing. But changes to the Crimes Act will criminalise disbelief. The new conversion therapy bill will allow the health system to trans away the gay with impunity, sterilising young lesbians and gay people and setting them on a lifetime of physical and mental health issues. The UK gender clinician's recent dark joke that there will be no gay and lesbian kids left is true here too. These bills are postmodernism's queer theory on steroids. Gender theory is a belief system that who you are is determined by the repetition of performances that is not based in science, but in mystical beliefs about indigenous genders and people who are born in the wrong body. It's a retreat from liberal democracy into authoritarian bullying. Adult fantasies are being visited on the bodies and minds of the young. If anyone in government has seen these linked effects of the policy and the legislation, they're not telling the public. We do not support a bill that allows condition-free self-identification with its massive unintended consequences. We think the issues raised are so serious that not only should the order paper be withdrawn, but a commission of inquiry should tackle the issues about the government-wide replacement of sex with gender identity.
We say big changes like these require not just good consultation, but also very good evidence. It's not possible to make these kind of fundamental changes to society and expect there to be no impacts. This bill says a sex marker can change just based on the applicant's say-so, but we would not simply allow other things in this way. For example, we don't allow asylum seekers to just self-identify as citizens, no matter how kind or validating this might be. If this law goes through, it will be simpler to change a sex marker than to get a disability parking permit. But what is closest to our heart is that lesbians are under threat. In the UK, a bearded man, Alex Drummond, goes into schools and tells kids that she is a lesbian. Trans-identified men threaten young lesbians if they don't include them as potential partner. At rainbow conferences, they teach each other how to overcome the so-called cotton ceiling. If you don't know this term, look it up, it's interesting. Several government agencies have already redefined lesbian and gay to be same gender attracted, thus making sexual orientation completely meaningless. Lesbians and gay men are the collateral damage of gender ideology.
There are impacts on children too. Despite the emotional stories the committee has heard from parents, gender questioning is a normal and predictable part of childhood development. But social contagion is increasing, and evidence shows that it is very cool for smart but awkward kids to become trans. Most would have resolved their gender issues without treatment. The research on this is absolutely clear. But this new legislation will confirm as transgender thousands and thousands of young New Zealand people. Most of these would have become gay or lesbian adults. Detransitioners are mainly young women. We've met some of them in New Zealand. Thinking they were male, they've had gender-affirming psychotherapy, one-sided, as you understand, medicine and surgery. They subsequently realized that among the causes of their belief were misogyny and homophobia. All of them are now lesbian. In New Zealand, we believe that children are being medicated significantly more freely than in Australia and in the UK. The data we have shows that it may be even as much as 10 times higher. We can guarantee that if there is not a commission of inquiry now, there will be a much more poignant one in a decade or two.
Can we go Sabine quickly? I just want to take a couple of questions before you go. So you've only got a second or two left.
So we're asking, should women and girls have services that meet their needs? Women meeting together created the feminist movement. Lava helped draft the Human Rights Act to include lesbians. And this, plus the Bill of Rights, protected our rights. But there's much more work to be done to prevent violence and to support girls. But these laws are now being eroded from within. If sex is drained of its meaning, girls' and women's rights disappear too. Most affected by this law are women who are vulnerable, prisoners, women who have been raped, women using refuges. They are in no position to take out court cases, which will be their only option to retain their sex-based provisions. Instead, like in Scotland, for example, women are just silently retreating and relying on family and friends. UK research that 100% of women appreciate single-sex services, even when parallel ones are available. This bill grants not human rights, but special and excessive rights. Excessive rights to privacy, reinvention, and appearance medicine will have unforeseen and grave consequences. There's a guarantee that these excessive rights will be used dishonestly. Breaches of trust and increased alienation in the community are the likely outcomes.
We believe the bill will be a millstone around the government's neck and a disaster for women and children. The aims of both trans people and women can be balanced through principled, simple arrangements, yet the government hasn't sought them. Indeed, the Minister and the Department of Internal Affairs have made it clear they think no problems exist. We challenge the Select Committee to stop this legislation and to propose an open process that ensures the good faith listening that occurs from almost all other legislation. We oppose the changes because this bill is a Trojan horse to remove sex as a category and to replace it with gender. Only females can claim women's identity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Celine. Deborah, you have a quick question because we've run a little bit over time.
Yes, I do have a question. It's a claim you've made that this is a very big change, but already people can change their gender identification on their passport and on their driver's license, which are standard forms of identification with just a statutory declaration. And all this does is create a parallel process for birth certificates instead of having to go through the family court process. So it just makes a process easier. So I'm struggling to understand how that is regarded as a very big change.
Deborah, neither of those changes were made with any public consultation either. I think at the time it was regarded as ultimately 100% likely that all of the people making a claim on those new regulations would have had a sex change. But in fact, between 80–90% of the men who claim that they are women have no surgical changes whatsoever. Some of them don't even take estrogen. The kind of people that we're worried about are people like the man that Sabina mentioned, who do absolutely nothing to change their identity. And that what will happen if we create a regime where every woman feels concerned if she approaches a man in a place where he shouldn't be, and then he claims that in fact he's a woman, then all of those women are very vulnerable. What's happening overseas is that people are being encouraged not to take, women particularly are being encouraged to keep their eyes averted, to not worry if somebody in one of their private spaces looks like a man. That's what's happening. And it has caused multiple instances of abuse to women, and the kind of hostility that women are facing at the moment is when that happened in, I think in Los Angeles, the fact that women had seen a sex offender in a women's spa was they were then attacked in the streets for being transphobic. That's what's happening here. We're living in a very, very toxic environment where not transgender people themselves, but trans ideology is creating an enormously negative effect on any claim that women have on their rights. So, and this is apparent by, if I don't know whether you've ever read, but I do encourage you to read J.K. Rowling's essay on, which caused a huge amount of concern. It's been widely panned by transgender activists as being transphobic and hateful. And if you read it, it is probably one of the most, she's a wonderful writer, as you know, it's probably one of the most.
I have read it. I have read
okay,
it.
so
I have read it.
Yeah.
So, Jan, I'm going to have to pull you up because you've taken your time, but you've used it very well. And I want to thank you and Valda, who's been sitting quietly in the background. I thank you for the effort you've gone to make your submission.
Well, I do hope that it's given you some pause for thought, because it appears to me that most of the people who've had the chance to be spoken on this panel and the other one have not received the respect that they're due as members of the public, giving up their time to prepare good quality information. And I feel very, very strongly about that. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that I'm not going to, I can't comment one way or the other, but I think that we've done pretty well on the whole, because it's a very challenging topic for both our submitters and for our select committee, clearly. So thank you for coming on. And we'll move on to our next submitter, who I think I saw in the background.